What's going on, boys and girls, and welcome into another edition of the Jim Bratton podcast. I just wanted to come on today before everybody sort of starts their football weekends and what have you. And as you can see, I am based on this hoodie that I've got on today. I'm certainly excited for my football weekend. There's a very big game coming up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, tomorrow evening, actually, between the Tennessee Vols and the Alabama Crimson Tide. I'm not going to get into that today necessarily, as you can see from the title of this particular episode of the show, but I just did think it was important to go ahead and point it out. Lots of football, lots of good football going on this weekend. But what I am going to be talking about today is some of the big news that came from St. Thomas Sports Park over the course of the past week, which is that Brian Callahan is no longer the head football coach of the Tennessee Titans, in a move that was a shock to basically nobody. I mean, with pretty much every Titans fan out there has seen the writing on the wall as it relates to this particular situation for quite some time now. But I guess the timing can be shocking in some ways. Maybe they could have waited until the end of the season. Maybe they could have listened to my hot take that I gave out to you guys last week or whenever it was on the show, when I said that they could possibly wait until after week 7 when the Titans probably lose to the Patriots in probably a little bit of heartbreaking fashion, maybe a little bit of a thumping, if you will, at the hands of Mike Vrabel, who in a lot of people's minds, certainly mine, should probably still be the Tennessee Titans head coach, in my opinion. But hindsight is 2020 in many ways, and at the end of the day, we all just have to move on and move forward, I suppose. But what am I going to be talking about today? I'm going to be discussing, obviously, why Brian Callahan was fired and where the Titans go from here. I'm going to be laying out a few possible candidates that could be. Obviously, the rumor mill has already been circling in that regard, with plenty of names that have come up over the course of the last week that could be potential fits for the Tennessee Titans job. And also, at the very end of the show, I'm going to be asking the question that many people in sports media have been asking. Certainly, many fans have been asking as well, and that is, where's Miss Amy? Where is Amy Adams Strunk, the controlling owner of the Tennessee Titans organization? Yeah, it's pretty typical when your organization makes changes, like I don't know, firing a head coach, then you might want to be present at a press conference where you announce the firing of said now former head coach, rather than just have the executives there, quote, speaking for you. Anyway, I'm definitely going to get into that at the end of the show, but Brian Callahan And again, as I was alluding to at the outset here, this is a move that had to be made. We're talking about a guy who is 4-19 in his 1 year and let's see, 6 games tenure as the head coach. 4-19, not good. And of course, last year was sort of an understandable because the team was frankly just not very good last year. They're not very good this year either. But certainly that jump from year 1 to year 2, you want to see a certain amount of growth in the program and the organization, and that is something that President of Football Operations Chad Brinker and General Manager Mike Berganzi laid out in their press conference the other night, which is we just did not see enough growth from the football team. And certainly a lot of people could come up with the argument of, oh, the coach can only do so much. What are the players doing? Maybe the players just aren't that good. Point taken in that regard. But you can't necessarily go out and fire half of the active roster during the course of the season now, can you? That wouldn't make a lot of sense. And so from that point, you have to look upward, up the organizational chart, and see where else changes can be made. And this is obviously a change that had to be made. But Brian Callahan, 4-19 in his tenure as head coach of the Titans. And my next point is this sort of piggybacks onto Brinker and Berganzi's comments of there not being enough growth. Certainly, and this goes back to what I was saying from the transition from last year to this year. When you pick a quarterback, especially at number 1 overall, certainly you expect that player to be able to elevate everybody else in the organization. And I'm not saying that Cam Ward is not the guy, because there have been flashes this year, even with the lack of talent on this roster, that perhaps he can be the guy moving forward with the right leadership at the top and more talent around him at the skill positions. And maybe even on the offensive line, I guess a lot of people could make that argument as well. But even with that being said, even with you selecting a guy like Cam Ward at number 1, who you expect to elevate everybody in your organization, the improvements on the field were just not being made. And in fact, a lot of people, you could argue that things have actually gotten worse over the course of the past 6 weeks. And that, of course, put the Tennessee Titans in a pretty difficult spot and sort of made this move sort of inevitable in many ways. Another thing that has made this move inevitable in many ways is some of the things that some of the guys were saying in the locker room leading up to or at least once I think it was leading up to certainly the firing of Brian Callahan. But one of the things Jeffrey Simmons said, and of course we all know how important a member of this football team Jeffrey Simmons is, team captain certainly the leader of that defense, if not one at least of the primary leaders of this football team, alongside ideally Cam Ward. But his comments in the locker room certainly did not help the mood when he said that leading up to the Raiders game, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that this might have been one of the worst weeks of practice we've ever had. Certainly, that does not speak well for the coaching staff's perspective, okay? You know, just from the standpoint of, as a coaching staff, you want to make sure that your guys are prepared and prepared well to meet the challenges that come with the week-to-week goings-on of the NFL, right? That's sort of a roundabout way of saying that you need to make sure guys are on their P's and Q's, pay attention to detail, and are ready to go out there and play and ideally win a football game. And so that did not speak well to Brian Callahan's future as the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. So, my next point, I suppose, moving on, now that we've moved past the Brian Callahan era, is where do we go from here? Where do the Tennessee Titans go from here as an organization? Obviously, you have to bring in an interim head coach to help navigate the waters through the end of the season, at least, and the Titans have obviously done that in bringing it, well, I say bringing in, but he was already on staff. But Mike McCoy has been named the interim head coach of the Tennessee Titans. Mike McCoy, and this is probably where my first guess would have been as to who the Tennessee Titans would pick as the interim head coach. Certainly, they had plenty of other options in-house, with the main one of those being John Bones Fossil, the special teams coordinator. Certainly, he could have been seen as a good fit for that role, because people forget that I say long time ago, it really hadn't been that long ago. I think it was in the 2016-2017 range. He was tapped as the Los Angeles Rams interim head coach when the Rams decided to move on from, wait for it, Jeff Fisher as their head coach. Obviously, that is a name that Tennessee Titans fans are very familiar with. But coming back to Bones Fossil for a minute, Bones Fossil was arguably the top candidate alongside maybe even Mike McCoy or Denard Wilson. And I was never really a fan of Denard Wilson sort of taking the reins as the interim head coach. To be fair, I don't know if I was the biggest fan of John Fossil being tapped as the interim head coach either, because, and the reason I say that is very important, because as I mentioned, he's the special teams coordinator. Certainly, special teams is a area of vast improvement for the Tennessee Titans, especially from last year to this year. You look at the emergence of a guy like Chimere Dike in the return game, and obviously that is a big impact that has been made from the jump from last year to this year. And certainly there's obviously other intricacies of special teams. And I've never been a football coach. I'm just a guy talking sports in his kitchen, okay? But what I do know is that you can see from watching tape that there have been improvements that have been made on special teams in the return game in particular. And so I can understand why the Titans would want to leave John Fossil in that role. Certainly, they would want to leave Denard Wilson in his role as the defensive coordinator as well. Mike McCoy was mainly, which of course brings up the question, why would they elevate Mike McCoy? Mike McCoy was basically a sort of senior offensive assistant, which makes plenty of sense for the Titans to have hired him in that role, because as he is very experienced football coach. He was most notably the head coach of the then San Diego Chargers recently, before they jumped ship and moved to Los Angeles. And he's been in a variety of different roles over the course of his career. He was very notably the offensive coordinator in Denver with Peyton Manning, and certainly it does help one's resume when you do have Peyton Manning as your starting quarterback. So kind of makes sense why he would get the Chargers job in many ways, doesn't it? But from there, he's been in various other offensive roles. As I mentioned, he was the Chargers head coach. Did not go well, obviously. And sort of bounced around the league and was most recently in Jacksonville as a part of Doug Peterson's coaching staff, and was probably instrumental in the development of Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Certainly Trevor Lawrence and certainly Mike McCoy is no longer there, but Trevor Lawrence has maybe taken some of the lessons from having an experienced head coach like Mike McCoy in the locker room. And to be fair to Mike McCoy, I'm at least on an interim basis, I'm at least encouraged by some of the things that he has said as it relates to Cam Ward in particular. One of the things, and I may paraphrase a little bit here, but one of the things that Mike McCoy said at his, I guess, introductory press conference, it wasn't really a press conference because, it's the middle of the season. They probably don't have time to engage in golden-clad press conferences, if you will. But one of the things Mike McCoy was saying that I was a pretty big fan of is talking up Cam Ward in many ways, saying that he's got I think Mike McCoy said, burning desire to be great. He has, I'm pretty sure that's an exact quote. He said, Cam Ward has a burning desire to be great. And you can see that, certainly, by the frustrations that Cam Ward showed in his press conference a couple of weeks ago, that you can see that he wants to be great, wants to win. More importantly, certainly one of the things that propelled Cam Ward to being the number one overall pick is his ability to win ball games. And it's when you come from an environment like Miami, where you're accustomed to winning ball games and transition from that to a NFL team who is 1-5 and frankly is literally a dropped ball away from not from the Titans, but you all remember the Cardinals play when Amari DeMarcado fumbled the ball as he was entering the end zone. Yeah, that didn't look good. Titans would have been down 27-6 at that point. You could make an argument that the Tennessee Titans could very well be 0-6 right now instead of 1-5, which makes me even angrier about pretty much all of this, everything that's going on as a Tennessee Titans fan. But that's enough of a sidebar from me as far as that is concerned. So, coming back to my main point here, Bones Fassel is not taking over as the interim head coach. I'm sort of getting my notes mixed up here. But Mike McCoy takes over as the interim head coach, and certainly, barring a miracle where the Tennessee Titans just run the table and figure out a way to make the playoffs, it's as sad as it is for me to say, I don't really see that happening. But barring I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying that it more than likely won't. Where do we go from here? I do not see Mike McCoy holding on to this job, barring the aforementioned miracle. But where do we go from here? Certainly the rumor mill has already been spinning as far as candidates are concerned, and it probably will not surprise you all, especially as Tennessee Titans fans who know the history of this team, that there is a gentleman named Mike at the top of the head coaching candidate list, that being Mike McCarthy. And I'm not going to run through all of the coaches that the Titans have had named Mike, but there's been quite a few of them. If Mike McCarthy does eventually get offered the job, and if he takes the job, he would definitely add to that list. But Mike McCarthy, very accomplished football coach, certainly a Super Bowl winning head coach with the Green Bay Packers, was most recently with the Dallas Cowboys. That was and had to leave the Dallas Cowboys mainly due to a contract dispute. And of course, when you're working for a guy like Jerry Jones, who has not necessarily had the best recent experience with negotiating contracts, and I'm not going to mention any names of people that Jerry Jones has negotiated contracts with. I'm not going to do that, Micah Parsons. But having said that, Mike McCarthy people tend to forget that Mike McCarthy was is a Super Bowl winning head coach. I know that this is basically ancient history at this point because it happened back in 2011, and certainly when you have prime Aaron Rodgers as your starting quarterback, that does not necessarily hurt anything. But Mike McCarthy, very, very experienced head coach, very winning head coach, has won a lot of football games in this league. And The reason he's at the top of the list is, and I've seen this in the comments of my various social media posts about this head coaching job, is that experience is something that the Tennessee Titans are in desperate need of right now. Certainly, they've kicked the tires on first-time head coaching candidates. One of them went very well, and I'm thinking just in recent history, one of them went very well in Mike Vrabel. Obviously, he is no longer at the helm of the Tennessee Titans. Should probably still be at the helm of the Tennessee Titans, in my opinion. But you could, and it's really not even that much of an argument, you could make an argument that turned out very well for the Tennessee Titans. The Brian Callahan experiment did not go too awfully well for the Tennessee Titans. And somebody pointed this out in the comments, and I agree with it, about Mike McCarthy, is that he's an ideal candidate for the job because taking a chance on a first-time head coach is a luxury that the Tennessee Titans cannot afford at the current time. Certainly they need a stable hand to help steer the ship of the organization in many ways. And fun fact about Mike McCarthy, and this is another reason, and nobody's really talking about this, but one of the reasons that I think Mike McCarthy could possibly be a good fit for the Titans job is the Chad Brinker effect. Before Chad Brinker, and even as I say this, I don't know how, and nobody really knows how long Chad Brinker could be in his current position as president of football operations based on the way Amy Adams-Strunk and the organization keep moving on from people. For all we know, Mike Bergonzi could very well be the only person in the front office in a position of authority by the end of the year. But reason I bring Chad Brinker up in this instance is because where did Chad Brinker spend a majority of his career before taking the Titans job? Oh, that's right. He was with the Green Bay Packers in their front office with head coach Mike McCarthy. So I'm sort of connecting dots in that regard. But Mike McCarthy, I would say he's probably my top candidate for the Titans head full-time job at this point. Certainly, many things over the course of the season can change my mind in that regard. But as of right now, Mike McCarthy is number one. There's been plenty of other names other than Mike McCarthy that have been circulated for this job. I'm just going to run through some of the others pretty quickly. Arthur Smith is a pretty interesting one when you consider his history with the organization, certainly coming in as a pretty hot candidate nowadays. Certainly some of the things he's done in Pittsburgh over the course of this season with Aaron Rodgers, of all players, certainly does not hurt his resume when it comes to the head coaching carousel. Obviously, Arthur Smith's tenure with the Atlanta Falcons did not go the best, and I can see why. I mean, when you do not find ways to use Drake London and Bijan Robinson properly, certainly people tend to scratch their heads and go, what? Why is this person a head coach? But you look at what he's doing in Pittsburgh with a now well past his prime Aaron Rodgers, and you begin to look at Arthur Smith's history with the Tennessee Titans organization, and you tend to scratch your head in a different way and go, maybe this guy's figuring it out. Maybe he does deserve a second chance as a head coach. And we've seen, to be fair to the possibility of this happening, we've seen second chance retread head coaches come in and have success with their new teams. Dan Quinn in Washington is a prime example of this. But maybe Arthur Smith is one of those candidates. Certainly did a very good job as the offensive coordinator for the Titans back in the day. Was part of a staff that helped propel them to an AFC championship game appearance. Helped get them to put up very good offensive numbers as a unit. And certainly Arthur Smith is going to be one of those names that circles the head coaching wagons possibly in a couple of months. Some of the other names, very quickly, I'm not going to go too in depth with their resumes. Cliff Kingsbury, former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, that did not go great, but after helping mold a guy like Jaden Daniels into the quarterback that he is nowadays, certainly that does not hurt the resume whatsoever. And I guess sticking with the offensive side of the ball, Joe Brady, who is currently the offensive coordinator in Buffalo. I'm not necessarily as high at this point as high on Joe Brady. I'm not taking anything away from Joe Brady. He's obviously heck of a football coach, but one of the things I've seen online, and of course make of this what you will, is that Joe Brady is possibly holding out for the Cincinnati Bengals head coaching job, depending on what happens with Zach Taylor at the end of the year. And one of the reasons why Joe Brady could, and this is what the rumor mill says, guys, don't shoot the guy that is quoting from the rumor mill on this one, but Joe Brady could possibly be holding out for the Bengals job in order to be reunited with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, who Joe Brady, was very instrumental in developing as a part of that LSU, that just dominant LSU national championship team back in 2019. So it would make a lot of sense for someone like Joe Brady to want to reunite with a fully healthy Joe Burrow. Obviously, Joe Burrow's currently in the process of rehabbing from the turf toe injury from a few weeks back. And obviously a receiver like Jamar Chase as well would not hurt. Jamar Chase, what a guy. That man had 16 catches last night. Can you believe that? 16 for a boatload of yards and I believe 2 touchdowns. I'd have to go back and check the box score on that. But quick sidebar about Jamar Chase. What a guy. What a guy. Jamar Chase. 38 fantasy points for Jamar Chase. What a guy. What a guy. Anyway, Joe Brady, coming back to my main point here. Joe Brady certainly going to be a hot coaching candidate for anybody that has an opening, but for Titans fans, especially if the Bengals do at the end of the season decide to make the move on from Zach Taylor, I would honestly sort of temper my expectations when it comes to Joe Brady. But that's pretty much it for coaching candidates with a background on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, there's plenty of candidates that have a defensive background that have been rumored for this job. Robert Saleh is one of them. Certainly, he's back with the San Francisco 49ers, former head coach of the New York Jets. Jesse Minter with the Los Angeles Chargers is one of them as well. And Brian Flores, who is currently the defensive coordinator in Minnesota, is going to be a hot candidate for head coaching jobs at the end of the year as well. But I am currently sort of the mindset, especially when you have a guy like Cam Ward, who you expect great things from in the future, you kind of want to drift your thinking more toward the offensive side of the football. And you may be thinking, oh, well, wasn't that the idea of Brian Callahan? Yeah, yes, it sort of was, but maybe sometimes the messenger is the key issue that you need to be focusing on, and getting a different messenger, a different voice in the head, literally in the head of Cam Ward, because of the sort of helmet technologies and whatnot. Maybe leaning more toward the offensive side of the ball, but having a new voice in charge, and certainly, preferably, a guy like a Mike McCarthy with the experience that you would want in a head coach, certainly with this organization, would go a long way to getting back to the top, if you will. So that's pretty much it as far as the preliminary list of head coaching candidates for the Tennessee Titans is concerned. And before I get out of here today, I sort of teased a question of what's going on with the Tennessee Titans right now, and this sort of speaks to the dysfunction of the Tennessee Titans in a lot of different ways. But where's Amy? Where's Amy? Where's Amy Adams-Strunk? It's her team. It is her football team. And as I was alluding to at the beginning of the show, typically when you make a change at head coach or hire a head coach, certainly Amy's been no stranger to appearing at those press conferences, as she was, I think, the person that introduced Brian Callahan at his introductory press conference after taking the Titans job. Certainly was not at the questionably timed press conference announcing the firing of Brian Callahan. And I say questionably timed because it took everybody like 7.5. This was basically a prime time press conference. Think about the timing of this chronologically, right? That they announced the news that Brian Callahan was, I believe it was about 1 o'clock. I think I remember specifically what time it was when the alert came over my phone that Brian Callahan was out. And after sort of making the shocked face, if you will, and not only that, realizing I also had to put out an episode sort of trashing the Tennessee Titans in some ways, following my previous episode of the show where I had trashed the Tennessee Titans in other ways. I believe coming back to what time it was when I got that alert, I believe it was in the 12 to 1 o'clock hour of the Monday afternoon. The Tennessee Titans did not have a press conference until I think 7 or 8 o'clock at night. It was a primetime press conference. They did not make the announcement that Mike McCoy would be taking over as the interim head coach until later in the day. And typically, when you make moves like this, everything has to be sharp. Everything has to be on point chronologically. And this was not one of those examples. The Tennessee Titans sort of bungled this whole situation and sort of led many people on the internets to speculate that maybe this was not a move that the Tennessee Titans wanted to make at this point in the season. But just the downright dysfunction of the way this was handled sort of irks me, because usually these things need to be done with spotless precision, if you will. But this was not one of those things. And coming back to my question of where's Amy, she's bound to have been in Houston at her home at this time, because one of the things that sort of irritates Titans fans, and matter of fact, Chad Brinker even said in this press conference that Amy Adams Strunk was at her home. Certainly she wasn't sitting next to him and Mike Bergonzi at the press conference announcing the firing of their head coach. But coming back to my main argument here, typically the owner wants to be, and I'm all for, don't get me wrong, I'm all for letting your football people like Mike Bergonzi and Chad Brinker manage the football operations and taking sort of a hands-off approach in some ways. However, having said that, as the owner, as the primary point person of an organization, everything, and this is true in sports and business and people's jobs. And as the head person in charge, everything inevitably does find its way back to you. And certainly when you make big decisions like this, you want to be at the forefront, because that would be your way of saying, this is my team. Ultimately, I have to take responsibility for what goes on. And in an ideal world, she would have come out and said, and maybe she has in her own way, but this is what I would have said if I were the owner of the Tennessee Titans. If I were Amy Adams Strunk, I would come out and say, certainly we wish Brian Callahan the absolute best. Unfortunately, this is the way things happen in the NFL. Things sort of spiraled out of control, and things were not going in a direction that I would have liked, that we would have liked, and certainly a change needed to be made. I, as the owner, as the head person in charge, to take full responsibility of that. And going forward, there's things that there's going to be a standard that needs to be met. And certainly I'm going to put Mike and Chad I'm going to give them all the resources possible that they need, all the resources possible, certainly, but all of the resources that they need in order to get this right. But of course, inevitably, everything does come back to me. And this is another little sidebar before I get out of here today, another little sidebar that I have about this organization. Another thing that I would say is that as an organization, we have got to get this right. We are a football team that has gone 4-19 in its last 23 games. We are spiraling out of control in many ways. We have to find a way to right the ship. We are moving there. At the same time, there are a lot of exciting things that are going on in our organization. We have a young quarterback who we think could be a franchise-changing player. We are moving into a new stadium in under 2 years' time. We have got to get this right. And certainly that has got to be the mindset going into this week's game against the New England Patriots. And the New England Patriots. The one thing I will say about this game before I get out of here is I'm not really looking forward to this game. I mean, obviously, I still am of the belief that Mike Vrabel should be the Tennessee Titans head coach. But hindsight is 20/20 on that. I do think, because it has to be. At this point, it has to be. It literally has to be. There are no other options in that regard. But I did think it was sort of funny when Mike Vrabel was asked about, did you keep any mementos from your time as head coach of the Titans? And he, in typical Mike Vrabel fashion, said, "Oh, well, I think the Goodwill on 8th Avenue's got a pretty good haul." Got all my Titans gear. But I did think that was sort of funny. But coming back to my point here, I'm not looking forward to this game. I don't know how much of this game I'm going to watch. I'm sort of, as tough as it is for me to say I'm sort of looking for other options in the noon window. I may very well be checking my fantasy app more than I am actually looking at the Titans-Patriots game. I'm not looking forward to it. I hate to say, I could be dead wrong, but the sad part is I really don't think I am. Kind of hard to be optimistic about everything that's going on with the Titans organization right now. And typically I would end the show by saying something positive, but I think I'm just going to have to end the show on this note before I throw up, based on how dysfunctional this organization is. I mean, my gosh. But I don't know. Maybe things will turn around before too long. Thank you all so much for watching this edition of the podcast. I hope you all enjoy your football Saturdays and Sundays and Mondays. I certainly hope, other than the Titans game, I'm looking forward to doing that as well. And I will see you guys next time.